You know those pictures from way back, like the 70s and 80s?
Yeah.
Forests just bare and lakes so clear they look like swimming pools, but lifeless.
Yeah.
That was acid rain, right?
Mm.
Really scary stuff back then. So today we're gonna like dive deep into acid rain, how it all happened, the politics, and maybe some things you didn't know.
You know what most people don't realize is that acid rain is, well, it's not just something we created, it's natural. It's been going on forever.
Really?
Oh yeah, think about volcanoes. They spew out sulfur. And even those little ants in your yard, they spray formic acid.
Huh?
So it's been happening, but when we had the industrial age, we kind of, well, we supersized it, turned something natural into a global problem.
Okay, so we're talking about rain, sure, but what makes it acidic? Like how acidic are we talking here?
Okay, so remember high school chemistry? The pH scale,
Oh, maybe.
it measures how acidic or basic something is. Like a lemon juice is pretty acidic, right?
Mhm.
That's about a 2 on the scale. And battery acid, that's a 1, really strong.
Right, right. I kind of remember that.
So where does rain fit in?
Yeah.
Well, pure rainwater, it'd be neutral, a 7 on that scale. But as it forms and falls, it picks up stuff, including those natural acids we talked about. But then we came along and started pumping out tons of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides from factories and power plants. It really threw things off.
So like we basically weaponized the rain.
Kind of, yeah. And here's where it gets, well, alarming. The pH scale, it's not linear, it's logarithmic.
Okay.
So going from a 7 to a 6, it doesn't just mean it's a little more acidic, it means it's 10 times more acidic.
Wow.
And a 5, that's 100 times more acidic. Even small changes in pollution were having a huge impact.
That's kind of scary. It's like a slow poison you don't even see.
Yeah, exactly. And the effects were bad, really bad. Like the lakes, one of the worst examples, scientists back in the 50s and 60s, they started seeing these crystal clear lakes. They looked almost sterile because they were no life.
Mhm.
Fish were dying, couldn't reproduce. And even the ones that lived, they were acting weird. Their signals were messed up, made them easy prey.
So it wasn't just fish dying. It was like the whole ecosystem was getting messed up.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the water. Birds were affected too. Their eggshells got thin because they were eating insects and worms that were, well, contaminated with acid.
Yeah.
And the forests, they were being stripped bare. The acid rain was taking nutrients from the soil, damaging the leaves and needles. It was widespread damage, and it was happening quietly for a long time.
Yeah, I remember those pictures of dead forests.
Yeah.
It was just sad. It felt like, I don't know, like an invisible enemy was attacking. Did anyone know what was going on? Or did it take a while to figure it out?
It took some time for scientists to really connect the dots. At first, they thought it was just a local problem,
Right.
but then they started seeing patterns. The worst areas were downwind from big industrial centers. That's when they realized it wasn't just local, it was, well, transnational.
Yeah, pollution doesn't care about borders, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets interesting, especially when you think about what was going on in the world back then. The U.S., with all its industry, was producing a lot of the pollution that was causing acid rain in Canada.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
Canadians were mad, calling it environmental aggression.
I can't blame them.
Yeah.
Imagine your lakes and forests, just beautiful places, slowly being poisoned by pollution from another country. It became a big problem between the U.S. and Canada.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just them. Scandinavian countries, same thing. Pollution from their industrialized neighbors in Europe was causing problems for them.
So ecological disaster, international tensions, anyone trying to fix this.
Well, it was complicated, even more so, because this was all happening during the Cold War. The U.S. and the Soviet Union, nuclear standoff, everyone was on edge. But something interesting came out of all that.
So you're saying, like in the middle of the Cold War, the U.S. saw, I don't know, like an opportunity in this acid rain mess.
You could say that, yeah. The U.S., especially under Reagan, they saw acid rain as a way to talk to the Soviets, without all the tension. It was a problem that affected everyone, regardless of politics.
Wait, so acid rain, like, helped end the Cold War? How does that even work?
Well, they were pretty smart about it. Instead of starting with the big stuff, like nuclear weapons, which could cause arguments, they focused on something smaller, easier to manage, like sharing data.
Like a science exchange program or something?
Exactly. Get scientists from both sides talking, comparing their research on acid rain. It was a way to build some trust, reopen those lines of communication that had been shut down for years. And once they started working together on this environmental problem, it made it easier to talk about other, more sensitive stuff.
That's wild. So while Canada is dealing with the U.S.'s pollution, the U.S. is using that same problem to try and, like, cool things down with the Soviets.
Yeah, it shows you how something that seems like a local environmental problem can actually have global political effects. But even with all that going on, there was a new problem brewing back home. People started doubting acid rain was even real.
Oh, I think I see where this is going. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, you got it. As people got more worried about acid rain, there was pushback, especially from the industries that were causing the pollution. And their tactics, well, they're kind of similar to what we see today with climate change.
So, like, saying the science isn't clear and that fixing it will wreck the economy?
Bingo. They'd say things like, we need more research before we do anything drastic, or this is going to kill jobs, hurt the economy, make us less competitive.
It's crazy how those same arguments pop up with every environmental problem. But even with that resistance, did anyone actually do anything about acid rain?
And here's where someone surprising comes in. George H.W. Bush. In the '88 election, he ran as, get this, the environmental president.
Really?
Yep, and he actually followed through.
Hold on, George H.W. Bush, the environmental guy. I don't remember that.
It might have been political, sure. But whatever the reason, he did something important. In 1990, he signed the Clean Air Act amendments. Big deal. It targeted lots of air pollutants, including the ones causing acid rain.
Yeah, I read about that. It passed with, like, tons of support from both parties. Can you imagine that happening today?
Right. Shows you how different things were.
Mm-hmm.
The Clean Air Act, it was a big win for the environment and public health. And a big part of why it worked was this new idea, cap and trade.
I've heard of that, but I don't really get it.
Okay, so basically they set a limit on how much sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides companies could release. But instead of just like forcing them to follow the rules, they let companies trade these permits. So if a company reduced their pollution more than they had to, they could sell their extra permits to a company that was having trouble meeting the limits.
So they made a market for reducing pollution. Pretty clever.
It was, and it worked. The Clean Air Act led to a big drop in sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions. Power plants started using scrubbers, those things that clean up the smoke from their stacks. Acid rain went down a lot. It was good for the environment, but it was also good for the economy. The EPA figured that for every dollar we spent on the Clean Air Act, we saved $4 in health and environmental benefits.
Sounds like everyone wins. Cleaner air, healthier people, even save money. So, problem solved, right? Happy ending.
Well, not so fast. Remember those dead lakes we talked about? As scientists kept studying acid rain, they found something unexpected. Some of those lakes were already acidic naturally, even before all the pollution.
You mean all that damage, it wasn't all from acid rain?
Yeah. Turns out some lakes, especially in areas with certain kinds of rocks, were already acidic because of natural stuff. And of course, the people who had been saying acid rain wasn't a big deal, they used this to say, see, we told you so.
So was it all for nothing then? All that work to fight acid rain?
Not at all. Yeah, some of the damage wasn't from acid rain. But the Clean Air Act still did a lot of good. Air and water quality improved, and it saved lives.
So it's another one of those complicated environmental problems with a complicated answer. But what about side effects? The podcast mentioned something about the scrubbers, the ones cleaning the smoke, causing other problems.
Right, that's one of the big lessons from acid rain. You always have trade-offs.
Okay.
And fixing one thing can create new problems. Those scrubbers, they cleaned the smoke, but they also created a lot of toxic sludge.
So we just moved the pollution from the air to the ground.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Power plants, at first, they were just dumping this sludge into rivers and landfills, created a whole new mess. It showed that you have to think about the entire life of a technology from start to finish.
It's like you solve one environmental problem, another one pops up.
Exactly, and that's why you got to keep watching, keep adapting. You can't just fix something and forget about it. You got to track what's happening, see if there are any unexpected problems, and be ready to change your approach.
So I guess the acid rain story, even with all the problems and side effects, kind of gives you hope.
Yeah.
We had this huge environmental problem, and, well, we didn't solve it perfectly, but we did make things a lot better.
Right.
Does that make you, I don't know, optimistic about dealing with, like, climate change and stuff?
It does, yeah. Acid rain shows us that we're not helpless. We can make noise, hold our leaders accountable, support policies that, protect the planet.
Right.
But it also shows us that we have to be careful and be ready to change.
Okay.
We have to learn from our mistakes, be flexible, and keep learning.
What about the people who just don't believe in environmental problems.
Yeah.
The ones who say it's all exaggerated. How do we convince them?
That's the tough one. I think, people don't like change,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to how we get energy or use resources. It's big stuff.
Right.
But we got to do a better job explaining the science, Make it clear, make it interesting, make it connect with what people care about.
Right. So, like, we have to make it personal, not just numbers and data.
Exactly. Help people see that this is about, the planet, about the future, about our kids and grandkids.
So for our listeners, if they're thinking, what can I do? What would you tell them?
First, stay informed. Read, listen, learn about the issues that matter to you.
Okay.
Then talk about it.
Yeah.
Tell your friends, family, your community. Support the groups working to protect the environment. And most importantly, vote. Make your voice count and hold those politicians accountable.
All good advice.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you that even small things, when a lot of people do them, can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And one last thing. Don't be afraid to be curious.
Okay.
Ask questions. Challenge what you think you know. Be open to new ideas. The more we learn about our planet, the more we see how everything is connected, and the better chance we have of finding solutions that work for everyone.
That's great. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into acid rain. It's a really interesting story, and it shows that environmental issues are complicated. There's no easy answers, and even when you fix something, there might be side effects.
Yeah.
And we always have to be paying attention, ready to adapt.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And to our listeners, keep learning, keep being curious, and keep fighting for a healthier planet. We'll be back next time with another deep dive, something else to get you thinking. Until then, thanks for listening.